I'd like to call the meeting to order. Today is Wednesday, October 2nd, 2019. The time is 7 p.m. Would you please call the roll?
Mayor Jorgensen.
Present.
Commissioner Wygand.
Present.
Commissioner Kaler.
Present.
Commissioner Crowley.
Present.
Commissioner Skidmore.
Present.
It sounds like we're all here tonight. I'd like to welcome those that are joining us in the meeting room and also those that are tuning in on our various methods to present our meetings in electronic form. We'll lead with the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation by Pastor Todd Miller with the Cherry Street Wesleyan Church. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. As usual, it's an honor to be here in front of you all. I sure appreciate you all inviting me here. Some of you know I'm a crossing guard at one of the schools, elementary schools, and this is Spirit Week, and today was Cowboy Day. I was going to wear my cowboy hat, but my wife hid it on me before I could get out the door. So, and I bring that up because I'm thinking of the past of Ottawa, the history of Ottawa, and how all the commissioners before you, all the leaders of this awesome city, how they have led it forward in leaving the past behind, but how we still remember our past. And I'm thankful for leaders like that. I wish we could get Cowboys Day back in Main Street. I love that part of the past that we've grown out of. So my prayer tonight is not just to invite the Holy Spirit to join us and to lead you, but for you all to continue to lead in a wonderful way, in a marvelous way, that you're leading us forward, and continue to remember where we've come from and honor the history of this wonderful city. So please bow with me. Oh, gracious Heavenly Father, I do thank you for leaders like this, leaders that seek you, seek your guidance. So at this time, I'd ask you to fill this room with your presence and fill these leaders with your wisdom. Help them to guide us forward, united, as much as a city can be united. Give us unity as we go forward, but help us to also honor the history, the wonderful history of Ottawa and the surrounding areas. We've grown a long ways, and we have a long ways to go. So help us to go forward, lead these leaders, and help us, the citizens of this wonderful city, to jump on board with the direction that you're guiding. And like I say, give us unity as we do move forward. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor. It may surprise you to know, Pastor, and others in this room, that I grew up wearing a cowboy hat and boots. So up until I graduated from college, and I hung up my hat. So, but I'm right there with you. So, thank you.
But there are pictures.
We'll now move on to the consent agenda, which is the approval of our agenda this evening. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I make that motion.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded as such. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. That moves us to the regular agenda, item 7. Do we have any public comments this year?
No one has registered.
Okay. I'll dispense with reading that paragraph and move on to item 8, declaration. At this time, I'd like to give the commissioners a chance to declare any conflict or communication that they've had that might influence their ability to consider today's issues impartially.
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner.
I have a direct effect with items 13 and 14, both professionally and personally, and I will abstain from any vote when it comes up.
Okay. All right, thank you, Commissioner. Is there any others? Okay. We'll proceed with new business, item 9.
Proclamation recognizing October 6 through 12, 2019 as Fire Prevention Week.
Since 1922, fire departments have actively supported Fire Prevention Week, making it the longest-running public health and safety observance on record. This year's campaign focus is "Not every hero wears a cape. Plan and practice your escape." Fire Chief Tim Mathias will accept the proclamation. It's going to be read by Commissioner Crowley.
And the proclamation reads as follows. Whereas the City of Ottawa, Kansas is committed to ensuring the safety and security of all those living in and visiting Ottawa. And whereas fire is a serious public safety concern both locally and nationally, and homes are the locations where people are the greatest risk from fire. And whereas home fires killed 2,630 people in the United States in 2017, according to the National Fire Protection Association, the NFPA, and fire departments in the United States responded to 357,000 home fires. And whereas most United States fire deaths, 4 out of 5, occur at home each year. And whereas when the smoke alarm sounds, Ottawa residents may have less than 2 minutes to escape to safety. And whereas Ottawa residents who have planned and practiced a home fire escape plan are more prepared and will therefore be more likely to survive a fire. And whereas Ottawa residents should teach children to escape on their own in case adults can't help them. And whereas Ottawa residents should make sure everyone in the home knows how to call 911 or the local emergency number from a cell phone or a neighbor's phone. And whereas Ottawa residents should get out and stay out, never going back inside the home for people, pets, or things. And whereas Ottawa residents are responsive to public education measures and can act to increase their safety from fire, especially in their homes. And whereas the 2019 Fire Prevention Week theme, Not Every Hero Wears a Cape, Plan and Practice Your Escape, effectively serves to remind us that we need to take personal steps to increase our safety from fire. Therefore, the governing body of the City of Ottawa does hereby proclaim October 6th through the 12th, 2019 as Fire Prevention Week, and urges the citizens of Ottawa to develop a home fire escape plan with all members of the household, practice it twice a year, and participate in many public safety activities and efforts of Ottawa's fire and emergency services during Fire Prevention Week 2019. Signed the second day of October 2019 by our Mayor, Blake Jorgensen.
Thank you. And Chief Mathias is here, and I understand you brought a special guest as well.
I did.
Would you like to accept it?
Sure, and then we'll say a few words.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, good evening. We do this every October, first full week of October. And this year, instead of talking about national statistics and what goes on, we're going to talk about local. Since I started in 1990, I've been involved with 11 fire deaths here in the city, and a couple in a previous job I had. So unfortunately, I'm well aware of what happens. So it does happen here in our community. Earlier this year, we had 2 incidents where we could have lost 2 more folks in the town, and with smoke detectors and good firefighting, we got to them and got them out, and we were very concerned about one of the citizens, but he pulled through and has no ill effects. So it happens. They're saying about 2 minutes now, and when I first started, it was a good 5 minutes. That change has come about from all the plastics are in our homes, all the hydrocarbons that we use, oils used for everything, to manufacture everything. But tonight I want to bring up a special guest that has truly been impacted by a fire fatality. And her name is Leanne Morris, and she is a citizen here in Ottawa. At the time of the incident, she was a citizen of Wellsville, and she has made it her passion and her, I believe, life goal is to help spread the word on fire safety and home fire plans. And we have partnered with her, and she has done a tremendous job in such a terrible, tragic event to help spread the word on how important it is. So I'd like to ask Leanne to come on up and for a little bit, tell you her story.
My name is Leanne Morris, and I am the founder of Operation Brex. In 2016, December 27th, we had a home fire. My husband was currently deployed at the time, and it was myself, my 3-year-old daughter, and my 6-year-old son. We had never practiced a home fire escape plan. That night, I put both of them to bed, and the smoke alarms went off, and I was able to get my 3-year-old out of the house. I never thought a home fire would happen to us. Never practiced it, didn't think of it, just didn't think it would happen, and it did. Because of our home fire, Brex, my son, passed away that evening. Since then, I have made it a personal mission to be an advocate for home fire escape plans. I have reached out to the state of Kansas, and their recommendation originally was 2 times a year. Recently, you can view their website. After speaking with them, they've now changed it to 4 times a year. I recently, in September, did a webinar with NFPA. It was an international webinar regarding home fire escape plans. I have been partnering with them to work on getting home fire escape plans into schools more often than once a year during Fire Safety Week. This year, I have reached out to an elementary school to have it as a pilot school to give them home fire escape plans 4 times a year for the parents to do with the child. They both sign it front and back. They have 2 weeks and they bring it back. If all 4 home fire escape plans come back at the end of the year, that classroom will get a pizza party. So I have made it a personal mission to bring awareness to home fire escape plans and to practice them frequently, because you never think it'll happen to you, and it does, because fire doesn't discriminate. So that's what I am working on.
That's good.
Well, thank you, Leanne.
Thank you.
I had the opportunity to listen to a presentation from Leanne at a Kiwanis meeting, I guess it's been a few months ago, and there's very heart-rendering what you went through, but thank you for the job that you're doing to spread fire safety. Let's move on to item 10.
Proclamation recognizing Ottawa High School Wall of Honor Days.
Proclamation honoring the 2019 inductees Henry Kissinger, John Cohen, and James Dietz. Candy Campbell with the OHS Wall of Honor coordinator, and Michelle Gray will accept the proclamation. And the proclamation reads as follows. Whereas the Renaissance program of Ottawa High School created a Wall of Honor in the spring of 1997 to recognize special graduates of Ottawa High School who graduated at least 10 years earlier. And whereas the school board of USD 290 approved this project in the spring of 1997, and thereby made the Wall of Honor the greatest recognition which Ottawa High School can bestow upon a graduate. And whereas the 2019 group of inductees include Henry Kissinger, a physicist and OHS class of 1940, John Cohen, a community leader, Ottawa Chamber of Commerce president, class of 1974, and James Dietz, a photographer and photography software designer who was with the class of 1984. And whereas these inductees will be honored at a banquet on Thursday, October 17th, 2019, and officially inducted at halftime at the Ottawa High School football game on Friday, October 18th, 2019. Now therefore, the governing body of the City of Ottawa, Kansas does hereby proclaim October 17th and 18th, 2019 as Ottawa High School Wall of Honor Days, and encourages all citizens to join in honoring these 3 outstanding individuals who graduated from the Ottawa High School. Signed the 2nd day of October 2019 by the mayor. And I have 3 copies of these. Would you like to come and accept on their behalf? You bet.
I would like to thank the Ottawa City Commissioners and the Ottawa community for your continued support of the Wall of Honor program. This is our 22nd year. I would also encourage the community members to reach out to us. You can find an application on the USC 290's website. Who better knows what is going on in our community and around our country in regards to what alumni are doing and how they are contributing to not only their communities and or their professions. And we would love to continue this program as long as possible, but we need the local community and former alumni to help us in finding those alumni that are very deserving. And all that we ask is that they have graduated, have been out of school for 10 years, and that you let us know how you feel that they have contributed in a positive manner to their community and or their profession. So once again, thank you for your continued support of the program.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Let's move on to item 11, please.
Request of approval of ordinance amending Chapter 12, Article 3, Section 12-311, 2-hour parking zones, and Section 12-316, reserved parking areas of municipal code.
Staff recommends the following changes, which are parking on the north side of 4th Street from Main to Hickory to be changed to 2-hour parking, while maintaining 6 spaces on the eastern portion of 4th Street to be 2-hour parking unless the vehicle has a county-issued permit that would allow all-day parking. And we have Mr. Hafley to talk about this matter.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. As you read, this is a change to the parking on the north side of 4th Street, which is the south side of the courthouse from Main to Hickory. Currently, that's all-day parking all the way across there on the north side of 4th Street, and we're recommending to change that to 2-hour parking with the exception of the last 6 spaces that would be allowed for county employee parking if they have a permit from the county. To allow them to park there Monday through Friday for all day during the business hours.
Okay. Do we have any questions for Mr. Hafley?
This is what we looked at our study session a little over a week ago, right, Michael?
Yes,
So,
that's correct.
since we didn't have a public forum of any kind, have there been any public comments to you or to City Hall regarding this?
I have not received anything.
Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion. We approve item number 11.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded as such. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, let's proceed to vote.
How do you vote, Commissioner Kaler?
Yes.
Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Weigand?
Yes.
Mayor Jorgensen?
And I vote yes, motion carries.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item 12.
Request for approval of ordinance for conditional use permit to allow mini storage, self-storage at 1610 to 1616 South Main Street in a C3 General Commercial District.
David Allen, on behalf of Diddy Properties LLC, has applied for a conditional use permit for the above property. The intent is to develop tracts with 102 mini storage units. The Planning Commission recommends approval of the permit by a vote of 5-0 with 1 abstention. And we have Planning Director or Public,
It's okay.
the Community Development Director, Wendy Lee, to talk about this.
I'll
this
answer
matter.
to any of those things. I've had my title changed a few times over the years. Good evening, Commissioners and Mayor. The Planning Commission has a number of items on your agenda tonight, and the first one is for the mini storage. This property, the developers are actually here, so if you want to ask them questions before we're done, you're sure welcome to do that. They've proposed approximately 102 mini storage units. They would have to submit a full site plan, but they of course don't want to go through that if the conditional use wouldn't be allowed. So the first stage is to go through the conditional use permit. When we held that hearing, there were no comments. The only real condition is that the 2 tracks be titled together. Only one of them has frontage on Main, and the area to the west is really was a railroad spur. It's used by the community. It's sort of like an alley, but it's actually not a public road. Both of these lots are zoned C3, and mini storage is a conditional use allowed in that. The Planning Commission approved a similar action within a few blocks of this about a year ago, and are comfortable with these locations. The portion on Main is fairly narrow,
And that first portion there on Main wouldn't change under this proposal. It would continue to have an office, or if it did have some storage, it would be in that building enclosed. The bulk of the storage is actually to the west, behind the auto parts store, along the alleyway, if you will call it that. And so after some discussion, the Planning Commission recommended this to you with, for approval. The abstention was because one of the Planning Commissioners has interest in the other mini storage property.
Do you have any questions for Ms. Lee?
Let's talk about the right-of-way. Is that going to change
Not
down
a-
that path? Or will the cars still be able to traverse north and south behind this?
We haven't seen their site plan, their full site plan yet, so I can't really fully answer that. We are in the midst of discussing with Wildlife and Parks, and there's been some general sense that if that rocked area were to go away, we would be able to use the true right-of-way where the trail is located if we needed to, in order to continue to have a pathway through there.
Okay.
That would come at some cost, because relocating it has a cost. But we are at least trying to make sure that we have alternatives covered should we no longer have access. It's really important from a public safety standpoint that we have a way through that area for fire safety, most particularly.
Can you talk about the process? We're looking at the conditional use. They'll be coming back to you with a site plan, and that doesn't make it to our level? Is that
No,
correct?
so they had a concept plan, which I think we attached to your packet, and I think it'll largely come to that, but their full site plan would include stormwater. They have to make sure they can make the turns within the boundaries, show us more of the details that the site would be developed with. So, for example, they put in that number, they think they can meet that, but if for some reason there's something they discover, an easement, or we need to put a tree here, or something like that, it changes the number. That's the kind of things that could happen. But yes, it would be finalized by the Planning Commission.
Gotcha. Any further questions for Ms. Lee? Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner,
I'll make the motion to approve item 12 on our agenda.
is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded as such. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, let's proceed to vote.
How do you vote, Commissioner Wygand?
Yes.
Commissioner Kaler?
Yes.
Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Mayor Jorgensen?
And I vote yes, motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. So, let's move on to item 13.
Request for approval of ordinance for conditional use permit to allow construction of a multifamily dwelling at 206 South Cedar.
Bill Crowley with Platinum Properties LLC has applied for a conditional use permit for the above property. The intent is to construct a multifamily dwelling with 5 units. A public hearing was held. The Planning Commission recommends approval by a vote of 6-0 with one condition. If the 5th unit has 2 or more bedrooms, the applicant shall provide an additional parking space. And we also have Ms. Lee here to speak on this matter.
So this property is immediately south of the skating rink. It's been vacant for as long as I can remember. And so as we've talked in several meetings, housing's been important to the community. And what I'm really excited about is that we are actually seeing a lot of infill, and we're at the point now where some of that infill is on lots that no one has looked at for some time. And so along Cedar, it's not really all that appropriate for necessarily a retail-like use. This is a good place where, again, putting housing with some density close to the downtown benefits both our housing market as well as our downtown area, creating more activity and more movement, more people, which can support then hopefully more of the business that already exists in our downtown. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on this. There were no comments from the public. The developer had indicated that the intent was to have 4 efficiency units, and we have the floor plan for that, with the potential of a 5th unit on the 2nd floor, with that unit being a 2 to 3 bedroom unit. Because recently some comments have been made about having adequate parking when we consider these conditional uses in the C4 district, staff recommended and the Planning Commission agreed that an additional parking space, should that unit have a 2nd or 3rd bedroom, would be appropriate. The developer had actually shown 6 on their plan, but by the way the regulations are written, we could only require 5. So what we're really saying is 1 additional for a total of 6 be provided at a minimum on the lot. Happy to answer any questions.
Total of 6, including the upstairs 2 or 3 bedroom apartment?
Yes,
Is that
if there's a
the-
5th unit, then
You're
it would
talking
go
about
to.
additional being 1 more, a total of 6?
Yes.
Okay.
And if there's only the 4 units on the first floor, for example, if they elect to reduce that number, it would just be the 4.
Any further questions?
Would the parking be on the lot, or is the parking?
No, the parking is on the lot off of the alley. There is a public parking lot behind this in a general area. Some of that is private and some of it is public. But with the conditional use in this district, it is required to have some parking on the lot,
Is there parking available on the street?
not on
On
Cedar.
Cedar.
Well, if you park across the street, so
East
visitors
side.
could do that, but it would not be all that convenient, certainly for the users. There's a little bit of grade to this tract, and so as a part of that discussion, and somebody could come in and ask for access to Cedar, but we tend to try and restrict access to Cedar as much as possible to the sides or the alley, simply because Cedar carries so much traffic. There's not a complete prohibition, but we try not to do that for safety.
Has Mr. Crowley submitted a site plan? They've approved the site plan?
They have to submit a concept plan, which we have. They would have to submit a full site plan.
And how many parking places has he submitted?
The concept plan showed 6. But the reason for the
Should be good.
condition, yeah, he's comfortable with the 6. The reason for the condition is we could only require 5. So this requires the 6th one, should the 5th unit be built.
Do you recall how wide this lot is?
A 50-foot track.
50? Okay. And the second one that we're going to be looking at is the same size?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, I personally am excited to see us infill some of these vacant lots. Sometimes you don't realize that we have a vacant lot until you look at it. We are approached in this manner here, and I think it's exciting to see all parts of our community being touched by development now. And with that said, I will make a motion we approve item number 13 on our agenda.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded as such. Is there any discussion? If not, let's proceed to vote.
How do you vote, Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Wygand?
Yes.
Commissioner Kaler?
Yes.
Commissioner Crowley?
Abstain.
Mayor Jorgensen?
And I vote yes, motion carries. Let's move to item 14.
Request for approval for conditional use permit to allow construction of a multifamily dwelling at 218 South Cedar.
This property is just a couple doors down from the last one that we talked about, and I think it's the same conditions as what was put on the last property.
That's correct. There's nothing different about it.
Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner?
I move that we approve the ordinance of granting conditional use to 218 South Cedar.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded as such. Is there any discussion?
I just want to say I thank the Crowley family for their investment in our community, not only on this bench, but also out in our community privately. So thank the Crowley family for that.
I would second that.
Second it.
I think there's already a motion on the floor.
Oh, okay.
Do that.
You can't talk
All right.
emotion on emotion. Okay, I forgot.
All right. Is there any further discussion? If not, let's proceed to vote.
How do you vote, Commissioner Crowley?
Abstain.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Wygand?
Yes.
Commissioner Kaler?
Yes.
Mayor Jorgensen?
And I vote yes, motion carries. Let's move to item 15.
Request for approval for conditional use permit to allow a 3-unit multifamily dwelling at 913 West Wilson Street.
And just to make a correction on our program, or our agenda, that is, instead of West Wilson, that is East Wilson is the correct address. Rick Dietz, Swim for Life LLC, has applied for a conditional use permit to remodel the above property into 3 multifamily dwelling units accessible to mobility challenged patrons. A public hearing was held, and the Planning Commission recommends approval of the permit by a vote of 6-0. And we have Ms. Lee to talk about this item as well.
This site, excuse me, this site currently is developed with a structure that's been used as a swimming pool. We had several conditional uses related to the swimming pool. However, it was closed again. There was even a conditional use approved for a gymnastics operation, but that never moved forward. And so the property's been vacant. The building has been vacant. The owners have then come back and said, we think what really is best there is if we were to put housing back in. And so they've asked for a conditional use process. This would be a remodel to the property, would result in 3 additional units into our housing stock. There's adequate parking there already because it had been used on a more commercial basis. And they intend, as this building is generally at grade, for it to be mobility challenged. That, to be clear, that does not mean it is fully accessible, but that if somebody had challenges, they may find it far more accessible than some units. I know there was a question asked about how many bedrooms were in this project. It's 1 and 2 bedrooms. And we don't have a full construction plan because, again, they want to be sure that they can achieve the conditional use process before they invest in the design. The public hearing was held. It was actually continued. We had some neighbors that came into the first one and asked some questions and talked about what had been there and the various things. One of the questions was about would additional fencing be installed, and the developer had indicated that the previous occupant of that property had declined to have the fence there, but if these occupants wished to have it, that they would install it. So other than that, we had no follow-up comments at the second phase of that hearing, and the Planning Commission recommended this to you as well.
What would be the advantage, disadvantage, the difference between a special use permit and a commercial area, or we just rezone it because from now on it'll be a residential property?
Well, this property is zoned residentially.
It is.
It is. But in order to get to the second or third unit, there's some conditions, and that's what they're complying with
That's
here.
the special.
Yeah. It depends on the size of the tract and how many units, but when you're adding onto this,
Okay.
that's what requires it. In the previous 2 applications, those were in the C4 district.
So the swimming pool had a special use permit in a
Yes,
residential
the
neighborhood?
pool had a conditional use, and part of our discussion, if you had a chance to read through those findings, was that clearly the pool was at much more conflict with the neighborhood than would
Yeah.
3 1 or 2 bedroom units. Far more compliant to have residential there again.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
for full disclosure, my business has done electrical work for Rick Dietz before, but at this point I have not been contacted about this project. So I feel comfortable, voting when time comes.
Okay. Thank you for the transparency there. Is there any further questions for Ms. Lee?
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner?
I move that we approve the ordinance for conditional use for the dwelling at 913 East Wilson.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded as such. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, let's proceed to vote.
How do you vote, Commissioner Kaler?
Yes.
Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Wygand?
Yes.
Mayor Jorgensen?
And I vote yes, motion carries. Let's move on to item 16.
Request for approval of ordinance to rezone property at 728 North Cedar from R1 Low Density Residential District to R1 PUD Low Density Residential with Planned Unit Development PUD Overlay District.
This rezone request was submitted by Heartland Design Build LLC, which is proposing lots for 18 single-family residential structures on the property. A public hearing was held. The Planning Commission recommends approval by a vote of 5-0 with 1 abstention, and we have Ms. Lee here to talk about this item as well. But before we do that, I have a point I have a question for our city attorney. I do have a conflict. I do business with Heartland Design Build. I can abstain, but should I pass the gavel?
Mr. Mayor, you can continue to run the meeting so long as you've declared your conflict and your intention to abstain from the actual vote. It's not a conflict for you to continue running the meeting and performing your duties as mayor.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Lee, would you like to talk on this item?
Sure. Just in case anybody's trying to count, this item has to do with the proposal to build 18, to create 18 new additional lots. This would depending on how you act, result in 31 total units we've talked about tonight. That's the single most number of units we've had in some years. Probably since the last time we had a major subdivision proposal. So when we were looking at this property, we were talking about it's a combination of both a rezoning and a platting action. A preliminary plat, or preliminary planned unit development is that. It is a zoning classification, that's the PUD overlay that goes over the R1 zoning, and then the platting, so how is it that they're going to create the tracts? I met with these developers some months back when they were considering purchasing this property, just in case people in the listening or others don't know where this is. This is the former Lincoln School site. And it's been long desire of this body as well as the other elected bodies in the community to see this site redeveloped. It's a great neighborhood infill. So the proposal was to put single-family units back in there, but because the area is being platted, because it was one large tract as a school, it wasn't actually going to be able to look and feel as much like the neighborhood that it's in had it remained just in the R1 district. And that's because our subdivision requirements would have required 75 foot of frontage on each corner instead of 50, which is what the traditional neighborhood lots were many years ago. And so when the developers came in, because that was going to lose them at least 2 lots, depending on how you laid things out, we discussed doing this as a PUD. What they've elected to do then, as under their proposal, is to leave all the zoning regulations in place with the exception of the width of the frontage. That would be along Hickory and, what are we over there, Cedar? Yeah. So that's how you get to the 18. 9 lots on each side of the street, on each side of the north-south streets. The Planning Commission looked at this. There was quite a good involvement by the neighborhood. They asked a number of questions, some of which had to do with existing trees. How do we make it safer? There were some comments about traffic and stop signs and other things in the neighborhood that we then passed on. That wasn't really, obviously, the developer's burden to solve. And talked about reversing a couple of units, and we talked about stormwater and sidewalks and all of the rest of the things that would go along with the development. We believe with the infrastructure installation, which is a water line, and then they're working with the electric utility to install electric as well, that when they come back for their final planned unit development, they'll be able to address those comments as much as possible. It's not possible really to retain every tree because of driveways and other things, but to the best of everyone's ability, they'll try to develop that in a way that fits in with the neighborhood. The developers are here, and I'm sure if you have questions, they'd be happy to do that. Just want to be sure there wasn't any other thing I needed to mention to you. So the Planning Commission recommends this to you as well.
Do we have any questions for Ms. Lee on this item?
I think the only comment, I think it was answered in the study session, not going to cause any more stormwater runoff than the old school did and the old school facilities did.
So they have contracted with an engineer to work on the stormwater runoff. That really has been one of the questions that we've attempted to answer very well. Currently, that site sheet flows off to the south. It's all hard surface from there because it hits the streets and it stays on the streets until it gets down to what we call Possum Run. I don't know if it has another formal name. As a result of this development and the ability to regrade the site a little bit, the Public Works Director and I have discussed this with them, that maybe the best alternative is to put more of that water to the middle. If we were to anticipate, it's not going to have an alley, but think like that, if there were an area in the back, and that's where some of the easement would be, and capture some of that water. Some of it would be directed then north into the system, which would delay its arrival down south of K68. We believe that'll be a better alternative. But the real desire is to create a place where it can be absorbed in instead of hit hard surface and stay there. So
Just
that's our
aware of that due to the flood of August flying that we
Right.
need to be aware of. So
Right, and-
those things.
Nothing, from my perspective, could have altered, given that rainfall table. But they are working with an engineer, and we are reviewing their plans to try and do our best to make our community as resilient as possible to the fact that rainfall is increasing on a year-over-year basis.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
I
Do I
just
hear a
want-
motion?
I think this is an exciting night to look. We've been talking about quite a few developments here, and this one in particular for single-family housing. I'm thinking all these things fit well within the wheelhouse of what we're needing in this community right now, and I'm excited about this. Also part of the neighborhood revitalization program, many of these, and I'm thinking about this particular property where it's not on the tax rolls because it belongs to the school district, and it soon will be. And I think it's important for all of us to be aware and know that. So with all that said, I will definitely make a motion to make approval of item number 16.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded as such. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, let's proceed to vote.
How do you vote, Commissioner Wygand?
Yes.
Commissioner Kaler?
Yes.
Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Mayor Jorgensen?
And I abstain. Motion carries. We covered a lot of ground this evening. Let's move to report by city manager.
I have nothing, Commissioners.
Okay. How about reports by city commissioners? I'll start on my right. Commissioner Crowley?
I have nothing.
Commissioner Kaler?
None at this time.
Commissioner Wygand?
I do have nothing.
Commissioner Skidmore?
I just want to say our condolences. We had a very difficult day here Monday in our community, losing a couple of our citizens, the Croucher family and the Towners, and we just want to say that our prayers and thoughts going out to those two families as they suffer their losses going forward. Collective condolences from the city commission here, I know. But anyway, I'm sorry for their losses.
Well said, Commissioner. Move on to reports by the mayor, and I really have nothing more to add other than seconding some comments that have already been said this evening about the development that's happening within our community. We have several items that we talked about, whether it be mini storage units, commercial development, or residential development. It's a good time for our community, and a lot of things are happening right now. So thank you for those that are making that happen, and we look forward to a bright future for our community. Is there anything further that should come before this meeting? I will read the announcements. We have a study session at 4 p.m. on October 7th, and then October 14th, we will have the League of Kansas Municipalities Annual Conference in Overland Park, and I believe we're all attending that. But our Monday study session will be canceled, but we will have our next regular meeting at 9:30 a.m. on October 16th. If there's nothing further to come for this meeting, I now call it adjourned.